So if you're a manager and you want to host a public speaking training for your team, you should do an assessment first. Otherwise, you might get something you don't need. And one of the easiest ways to do an assessment is to write a criteria, and we're going to walk you through the criteria. Write a criteria on the left side of a page, and then write the names of your team members on top, and then evaluate each member on that criteria. And at the end, you do an audit and you see which area got the most checks, and that's going to tell you which training you need. So now let's walk through the criterias, and Rahul is going to do a few, and then Chaz will do a few, and then I'll do the last criteria, which is facilitation.
Awesome. Thanks, Peter. So the very first one that you want to do is what we call messaging. And messaging is all about your content. It's the structure, the flow, and the type of information that you're going to include when you are in a meeting or when you're speaking up. And it's really important because you want your messages to be very clear, and you want to persuade people and influence them. And you want to make sure that your team members aren't rambling. This is a big problem. So a couple questions here that you want to look through. 4 questions. The first is, do the team members have a system to create presentations with a clear and cohesive flow? That's the first one. Another question is, do they have well-planned and well-thought-out messages when they speak? Does it feel like they're pretty balanced, the type of information that they're using? Are they using data, statistics, things like that? And it feels like, okay, they came to this meeting prepared. Mm-hmm. Another is, are they concise? It's pretty self-explanatory. You don't want them rambling and repeating themselves and belaboring something, especially if they're in front of clients and things like that. They get the message across and they keep moving forward. And the last one is being able to set the right context depending on the audience. So do they, if they're speaking in a cross-functional team, do they change their message a little bit that's different from if they were just speaking to their peer group or just speaking to the team that they know all the time, their insular team? So that's another way to think about it. Are they setting the right context? Are they speaking strategically? Are they speaking tactically, depending on the situation? So those are 4 questions that you can ask around messaging.
Awesome. And before we go to the next one, so let's maybe walk through how would this look. So on the left side, you would write the 4 questions under the category of messaging. And then let's say one of your team members is Mike, the first one. Second is Sally. So for Mike, you go down and you put a check mark if it's correct. So what was the first question, Rahul, again?
Do they have a system to create a cohesive presentation every time?
Awesome. So if Mike has a system, you put a check mark. If Sally doesn't have a system, based on your assessment, you put an X. And when you evaluate your whole team, if the majority of them have X's under system for creating presentations, then you know that's the type of training you might need for your team. Now let's go with the rest of the criteria, because there's a few more.
Awesome. I love that one because it's really about the what. What are they saying? It's the message behind it all. It's where people get hung up a lot. And whether they improve there or find other areas, the other criteria to look for is with delivery. And delivery is really how to convey the message verbally as well as physically. That's what we want to look for. And some questions that you can ask for this one is, are they comfortable presenting to colleagues and leadership? It's a really good one because a lot of the times the comfort level isn't there with people. And if it's not there with people, it's not going to be there with their listeners or audience as well. And another question is, do they have strong eye contact and expressive body language? That's really important because with shyness or social aversion, eye contact won't be there as much. And that's where the comfort level comes into play more. It'll come out in eye contact and in other areas. So really amplifying those will help as well. And then do they have engaging, and do they know how to engage and interact with the room to really keep everyone interested. This is very important because when you are public speaking or presenting virtually, and a lot of time it's live, you have to be able to read the room well. Are you going on too long? Are you too much energy? Are you not enough energy? And really finding that good read and interacting with the room. And then the last part really is here, do they have strong executive presence? Are they able to stand up in front of people and just be there and not cower in or look downwards and just handle the space with ease? So that's really the delivery. Some team needs to look for is so they can really be able to speak expressively and comfortably.
Awesome. So we just did with Rahul messaging. Now we did the assessment of your team based on delivery. Now we go to the rest of the criteria.
Perfect. Thanks, Peter. And so the next one is storytelling. And storytelling for business is different than storytelling for personal, because in business, you want it to have a point. You want it to drive home something you're trying to communicate to them. And it's really a way to influence, persuade, and engage the room even more. So some questions you can ask for them or while speaking or presenting to the group: do they even use stories? That's the first step, right? Are their stories even brought in at all? And if they do use stories, do they keep them concise and relevant? That way it's for business. And is there a point to the story to really drive it home? And then the last part there is, do they have different stories? Customer success story, inspiration story, personal story, and really use a variation of them involved in their speaking styles.
Awesome. Thanks, Chaz. That last one made me smile with, does it have a point with storytelling? A lot of our clients get very nervous about being that person that they tell a story and everyone's like, okay, well, why did you say that story? So storytelling for business, super, super important.
Yeah.
Another area to think about in your assessment is impromptu speaking. And impromptu speaking is what the name implies, is how well do you think and speak on your feet. And we all know you don't always get a month to prepare for a meeting or a presentation. You get 5 minutes or 1 minute or 0. You get put on the spot. Hey, Peter, what do you think about this? And your ability to speak off the cuff and sound professional and be professional, handle those challenging situations is what we call impromptu speaking. So a couple questions to think about here. One is, are your team members able to think fast on their feet and interact with other smart team members? So like I said, you're asked a question, or a lot of people are in a discussion and they're talking about a lot of different ideas. Do they sit back because they're thinking too much and they don't really know when to speak up? Or can they jump in appropriately? That's why we talked about messaging. They don't just start rambling. They jump in, say what they need to say if they think it's important, and then they can step back again. That's one of them, interacting and thinking fast on their feet. Another is being able to stay grounded and confident when they are challenged. So that's a Q&A. That is when you're having a team meeting and people are disagreeing with you. How do they handle that kind of situation? They don't get aggressive and they also don't get defensive. So staying confident and grounded. And another is, like I mentioned, that not being prepared situation. How do they handle that? And are they able to show their expertise on the spot without going outside of their domain knowledge? Are they able to stay within their domain and be able to handle an unplanned situation? And another is standing up and defending their ideas. So I mentioned challenges, I mentioned disagreement. So can they stand up and defend their ideas when people disagree, but in a way that is professional and that keeps harmony within the team, but still stands up for what they believe in? So that's the area of impromptu to look at.
That's fantastic, because let's say some of your team members, they do have their messaging down, they do have their delivery skills down, they do have their storytelling down. However, if they can't perform in an impromptu situation, all of these things go out of the window.
Mhm.
So it's really important to pay attention and evaluate them based on that. And that leads us to the final criteria of evaluation, and that's facilitation. And facilitation is about managing an effective, engaging, and efficient meetings at work. Because most of the time, that's what we do as leaders in the workplace. And we have 4 questions for you in this category. The first one, can your team members lead a meeting with authority and confidence? Now, a lot of times people in corporations complain that meetings are not effective or they're not efficient and they don't achieve the outcomes. And a lot of times the reason is because the team leader is not in control, is not taking a leadership position. So that's the first question you want to ask and evaluate your team members on. The second one is, do they keep the meeting moving forward and focused? Do they have the skills to keep it on point? And if things get out of hand, we're discussing X and somebody brings Y, do they know how to bring it back to X? And that's an important skill. So you want to make sure you evaluate them based on that. Third question is, do they create action items and a sense of accountability at the end? A lot of meetings you go to, people talk, everybody leaves, and nobody knows what to do. If that's happening in your meetings or in your team members' meetings, then they need some help. And the last one, do they know how to handle interruptions and interrupt gracefully? These are 2 important skills. Like if they keep getting interrupted as a team lead, do they know how to handle it and bring it back to the agenda? And also, if somebody is rambling or trying to hijack the agenda, do they know how to interrupt? And gracefully, without hurting anybody, and gently bringing back the discussion to the goal. And these are the 4 questions that you can evaluate your team members on for facilitation skills.
Awesome. Super important on that one. The one that comes up a lot there is keeping it focused and not getting derailed by people over talking or interrupting and bringing it back. Sometimes some of the teams I know struggle with, it feels awkward to interrupt somebody and say, hey, do you mind pausing, and can we make sure we hit this point first before we jump over there? And that can always be a point of tension, but if they can do that, it's going to make their time much more effective.
Awesome. I remember one time with you, Rahul, I attended your facilitation training at Magnetic Speaking, and people knew that I was the founder and the CEO of the company. And we had an exercise where everybody was interrupting and I was supposed to put it back in order. And because they knew I was the CEO, they decided to challenge me, and everybody was jumping from every corner. And I said, this is not fair. And one lady that was sitting next to me, she was coming from Facebook or I don't know what high-tech company. And she's like, that's my life every single day.
You got a taste.
You got a taste. Yeah, exactly. So if you're thinking about bringing a public speaking training to your team, don't just bring a random training. You have to be precise on what kind of training will benefit your team. And the best way to do it is to do an evaluation of your team. And we gave you categories of things to evaluate your team and questions to go through for each team member. And that's going to give you an idea where does your team need help most with. And that should determine which training to do. Now, you can do it following this video, or there will be a link down below this video on YouTube or on our blog to download a PDF document that simplifies this for you. All you have to do is just go down, write down each team member from your team, and then evaluate each one with a check or an X. And at the end, you will know exactly which training to bring for them. Now, one recommendation here, if your team is bigger than 10, I would split them up into 2 categories. So for example, I would take the senior team leads and then the junior ones, or I would take expertise, or I would take, for example, skills. Like maybe there's skilled public speakers in your team, I would evaluate those by themselves and the rest by themselves. And the reason you want to do that, because you don't want to have an assessment with 20 people on it. It's going to be overwhelming. Break it down to 10. It's going to make it easy, simple. Plus, we found that the most effective trainings are between 10 and 12 people, because that gives a chance for everybody to participate, get feedback, and have stage time.